He didn't cry when he buried his wife, but the morning a stranger's little girl called him Dad. His hands began to shake so badly he spilled his coffee. For 3 years, Michael had lived the same ritual. 7:05 a.m., same cafe, same corner seat, same order. The world outside changed, new faces, new seasons, but his grief stayed perfectly timed. Until that one word, spoken by a child who looked up at him with eyes far too familiar. In that instant, something in his chest cracked open. Not from pain, but from recognition. And as silence stretched between the three of them, the widower, the barista, and her daughter, the air felt too fragile to breathe. Because how could a single word from a child I'd never met sound like it was meant for him? For a long moment, no one moved. The word, Dad, still hung in the air like a spark waiting to burn. Michael's pulse thudded in his ears, and Emily's eyes filled with apology she couldn't yet speak. Lily just looked between them, confusion softening into a shy smile, unaware of the wound she had touched. Michael forced a breath, setting the cup down gently, his voice a whisper too small for comfort. "It's okay," he said, though it wasn't. Something about that innocent mistake had cracked open a memory he had fought to bury, the sound of his own daughter's laughter, long silenced by time. Outside, the wind pressed against the glass, as if urging him to get up, to leave, but he couldn't. Not yet. He just sat there, letting the weight of that single word settle over him. Emily approached quietly, her voice trembling between apology and instinct. "She didn't mean anything by it," she murmured. But Michael's expression softened before she could finish. "Kids say what they feel," he replied, eyes still distant, as if speaking to someone unseen. Emily exhaled a slow, shaky breath, her gaze drifting toward Lily, who was now humming again, unbothered. Something about Michael's calm unsettled her. Not because it was cold, but because it felt too familiar, like someone used to losing things without a fight. For a fleeting second, she saw something beyond grief in him, the quiet ache of a man who still wanted to believe in morning light. When Michael finally rose to leave, he placed a folded bill under the saucer and turned toward the counter. "Keep the change," he said, voice low, his eyes briefly meeting Emily's, the kind of look that carries more silence than words. She nodded, uncertain whether to thank him or apologize again. Behind them, Lily called out, "Bye, Daddy." Cheerful, unknowing, the sound stopped him at the door. He didn't turn, but his hand lingered on the handle longer than it should have. Emily's breath caught, her smile trembling, and for the first time in 3 years, Michael didn't know whether to step forward or look back. Outside, the cold bit at his face, but he barely felt it. Snowflakes drifted across the streetlights as Michael walked toward his car, his reflection sliding across frost-covered windows. Inside the cafe, through the glass, Emily knelt to hug Lily, whispering gently that she shouldn't call people that name. Lily only nodded, confused, her small hands clutching her crayon drawing tightly. Michael stood by his car, watching them through the window. 2 figures wrapped in warmth and light, and for a moment he saw the family he once had, reflected back at him through glass and memory. Then he looked down, exhaled, and drove off into the pale morning, unaware that tomorrow would bring him back again. The next morning he told himself it was just for coffee. Not for her, not for the little girl, not for the words still echoing in his head. But as he stepped through the cafe door, the familiar bell above it sounded less like routine and more like return. Emily looked up, surprised but trying not to show it. Lily beamed, waving from her usual stool. "You came back," she said, and something about the joy in her voice made him feel both comforted and terrified. Michael smiled, small and unsure, as Emily slid his usual order across the counter. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was full of questions neither dared to ask. Days blurred into one another, each visit softer, warmer, quieter. Michael began arriving earlier, lingering longer. Sometimes, Lily would show him her drawings, crooked hearts, smiling suns, and families with no names. He'd smile and listen, his heart tightening with every picture. Emily noticed how easily Lily laughed around him and how, for the first time in years, Michael's smile didn't look borrowed. The cafe's hum wrapped around them like a secret they all understood. 3 lives quietly orbiting the same morning ritual, pretending it was just coincidence. One snowy afternoon, the cafe was nearly empty. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she poured a customer's drink, exhaustion hidden behind practiced grace. Michael noticed the way her shoulders slumped when she thought no one was watching. After closing, he quietly offered to help carry boxes from the back. "You don't have to," she said, but her eyes betrayed gratitude. They worked in silence, interrupted only by the faint buzz of the refrigerator and Lily's soft laughter as she doodled nearby. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was something smaller, gentler. 2 tired hearts remembering what kindness felt like. Later that night, Michael sat in his car outside the cafe long after closing. Through the window, he watched Emily lock the door and lift Lily into her arms. The girl's head rested on her mother's shoulder, fast asleep. Something inside him ached. Not out of longing, but memory. He remembered carrying his own daughter that way years ago, whispering stories into her hair. The ache was heavy, but it didn't hurt the same way it used to. It felt alive. And that frightened him more than grief ever had. That night, Emily tucked Lily into bed and sat quietly at the kitchen table, tracing her fingers over a cold mug of tea. Her thoughts drifted toward the man who came every morning, polite, gentle, distant. She didn't know his story, but something about him felt familiar, like someone who had lost the same kind of silence she carried. Upstairs, Lily mumbled sleepily, "Mom, when he comes tomorrow, can I show him my new picture?" Emily smiled faintly in the dim light. "We'll see, sweetheart." She didn't notice her own reflection in the window, a woman who hadn't realized that someone was finally looking back. It started with a sound, Lily's laughter echoing through the cafe, high and bright, cutting through the quiet like sunlight through clouds. Michael froze, hand tightening around his cup. For a heartbeat, he wasn't in the cafe anymore. He was back in the passenger seat of a car filled with the same laughter. His daughter's voice, just before the crash, just before everything went black. He blinked, forcing himself back into the present, breath shaking. Emily noticed the sudden stillness in his eyes. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, lying without words, because how do you explain to someone that a child's laughter can both heal and haunt you at the same time? That night, sleep refused him. The dream came again. Headlights flashing, rain pounding. The tiny voice calling, "Daddy, are you awake?" He jolted up in bed, drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a drum inside a hollow chest. The room was dark except for the city light leaking through the blinds. On his bedside table sat an old photograph, his wife and daughter, smiling under summer skies. He reached for it, his hand trembling. For 3 years, he'd lived like the picture frame was glass between him and the world, something he could see through but never touch again. Until a stranger's little girl cracked it open with one word. Morning came too early. At the cafe, Emily noticed the dark circles under his eyes. The way his smile didn't reach all the way. She didn't ask. She just poured his coffee a little slower, sliding it toward him with quiet care. Lily joined him at the table again, showing him a new drawing. This one of a house surrounded by trees with 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's you," she said proudly, pointing at the tallest one. Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to say something light, but the words caught somewhere between grief and gratitude. Instead, he just whispered, "It's beautiful." And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. Later that week, Emily found him standing outside the cafe, long after closing, staring through the window at the empty chairs. When she stepped out, he startled slightly, caught in his own thoughts. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked gently. He hesitated, then said, "She would have been 8 this year." Emily didn't ask who. She didn't need to. They stood in silence as snow fell around them, the streetlight casting halos across their faces. "Sometimes," he whispered, "it's easier to talk to strangers than ghosts." Emily nodded. Tears she didn't mean to show glistening in the cold. For a brief, fragile moment, they weren't two broken people. They were two survivors sharing the same night. The next morning, Michael brought something he hadn't in years. An old, worn children's book. "She loved this story," he said quietly when Lily ran up to greet him. He sat with her, reading aloud in a voice that trembled at the edges. Emily watched from behind the counter, her eyes softening as she realized this wasn't just a man trying to move on. This was a father trying to remember how to love again. When the story ended, Lily leaned her head against his arm and whispered, "Can you read another tomorrow?" His eyes glistened as he nodded. "Tomorrow," he said. The word felt like a promise. Days turned into weeks, and Michael's chair by the window no longer felt empty when he left. Lily waited for him each morning, sometimes running to the door before Emily could stop her. He began helping with small things, carrying boxes, fixing the flickering light above the counter, teaching Lily new words from the storybooks he brought. To anyone watching, they looked like a family, written by chance. But Emily's heart tightened with every smile. She'd built her world around caution, and now this man was rewriting it without asking permission. She didn't know whether to be grateful or afraid. That evening, after closing, Emily found Lily sitting by the window, drawing again. "What's that one?" she asked gently. Lily grinned. "It's us, me, you and Dad." The word struck like ice. Emily knelt, her smile fading. "Sweetheart, you can't call him that. He's just our friend, remember?" Lily frowned, confused. "But he reads to me, and he helps you. And he smiles like dads do." Emily's throat tightened as she pulled her daughter close. "I know, baby," she whispered. "But sometimes people don't stay." Lily looked up, innocent eyes full of trust. "Then maybe we can make him want to." The next morning, Emily tried to act normal. She smiled, took orders, made coffee, all the usual things, but her eyes avoided Michael's. He felt it instantly. When he offered to help with the register, she shook her head. When he tried to talk, she turned to wipe the counter. Finally, he asked softly, "Did I do something wrong?" She hesitated, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "No," she said, her voice breaking just enough to betray her truth. "That's what scares me." He didn't know how to respond. For once, silence wasn't comfortable. It was a wall neither of them knew how to climb. That night, after closing, Emily found Michael waiting outside again, snow gathering on his shoulders. "You shouldn't let her get attached," she said quietly, her breath visible in the cold. "She's just a kid," he replied. "She gets attached to kindness." Emily's eyes glistened, anger and sorrow mixing like storm clouds. "And what happens when you leave? When she calls for you, and you're gone?" He looked down, guilt flooding his face. "I don't want to hurt her," he whispered. "Then don't stay long enough to." Her voice cracked, but her resolve didn't. He watched her walk away, her footsteps muffled by snow, each one sounding like goodbye. For 2 mornings he didn't come. The cafe felt hollow, like something essential had been misplaced. Emily tried not to notice, but even Lily grew quiet. She sat at the window each morning, watching every car that passed. "Maybe he's busy," Emily said, forcing a smile. "Maybe," Lily whispered, her small hand pressing against the glass. The third morning, Emily found a small envelope beneath the door. "No name, just a note inside. Thank you for reminding me what warmth feels like." She closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Outside, the sky turned pale, the snow beginning to fall again. Silent, endless, familiar. The first morning without him was quiet, too quiet. The bell above the cafe door rang for other customers, but not for him. Emily poured coffee that no one ordered and smiled at faces she didn't see. Lily kept asking if he was sick, if maybe his car broke down, if maybe he just forgot. Emily answered each question with the same tired smile, her heart breaking a little more with every word. Routine returned, but warmth didn't. The space by the window felt colder, like a seat holding its breath, waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. A week passed. The note she kept folded in her apron pocket began to wear at the edges. Emily read it sometimes before bed, not sure if it comforted her or hurt more. Lily stopped drawing for a while. Her crayons stayed untouched. The napkins, blank. "Maybe he didn't like my pictures," she said one night, her voice small. Emily gathered her close, whispering, "No, sweetheart, he loved them." But her own voice trembled on the word, loved. It sounded final, like something meant for the past, not the present. She wished she could tell her daughter that some people don't leave because they stop caring. They leave because they care too much. At school, Lily began drawing again, but her pictures had changed. No more bright suns or hearts. Now they showed rainy skies and small figures standing alone. Her teacher, worried, mentioned it to Emily, who could only nod, too tired to explain. That night, Emily sat in the quiet cafe after closing, looking at the empty chair by the window. She whispered into the stillness, "You said you didn't want to hurt her, but you did." The words hung there, unanswered. Maybe she wasn't just talking to him. Maybe she was speaking to everyone who had ever left her. That weekend, Emily took Lily to the park to chase the gray out of her eyes. The air was cold but clear, the ground still dusted with snow. Children laughed, parents called out names, and for a moment, Emily could almost pretend they belonged to that world again. Lily ran ahead, her laughter echoing across the open space, and for the first time, Emily let herself laugh too. It sounded strange, like a voice she hadn't heard in years. But when Lily tripped and fell, crying out, Emily's heart lurched. As she ran to her daughter, she realized just how deep her fear of loss still ran. That love, no matter how small, always carried the risk of breaking. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Emily stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street below. Snow fell softly against the glass, reflecting her weary face. She reached into her apron and unfolded the note one last time, tracing the words with her thumb. "Thank you for reminding me what warmth feels like." She pressed it against her heart, eyes closed, whispering into the dark, "Then why did you take it away?" Down the hall, Lily murmured in her sleep, "Good night, Dad." Emily turned toward the sound, tears welling, realizing that, even in absence, his presence hadn't left them at all. Michael hadn't been back to the cemetery in almost 2 years. The drive there was quiet. No music, just the soft hum of tires over frozen ground. He parked near the oak tree that had lost half its leaves, just like he had lost half his world. Standing over the headstone, he finally said the words he'd rehearsed 1,000 times and never spoken aloud. "I tried to disappear after you left," he whispered, voice breaking. "But someone called me Dad again. And for the first time, I didn't want to run. The wind moved through the branches like a reply. Grief didn't vanish. It changed shape, becoming something gentler, a reminder that love never truly left him. He knelt in the snow, brushing ice from the letters of his wife's name. "You'd have liked her," he murmured, smiling faintly. "She runs a little cafe, burns the toast, and pretends she's not tired." His voice trembled with warmth instead of pain. "And her daughter? She's got the same laugh as ours." The words came easier now, flowing like something set free. For the first time, he didn't ask for forgiveness. He gave it to himself. He stayed there for hours, watching the sky fade from gray to gold, until it felt like the earth had exhaled with him. Driving home, he noticed things he hadn't in years. The way the sun hit the frozen trees, the faint laughter of children playing in a distant yard, the color of the sky shifting from blue to amber. Grief had blurred the world for so long, but now every detail felt sharper, more alive. When he reached his apartment, he opened the window and let the cold air in, breathing it deeply. For the first time, it didn't sting, it felt clean. He sat at his table and began to write a letter, not to his wife, but to the little girl who'd given him back his pulse. The next morning, Michael drove past the school, past the old bookstore, and found himself parked outside the cafe again. The windows were fogged with warmth, the sign flickering faintly in the cold. He didn't go in right away. He just sat there, watching through the glass. Inside, he saw Emily handing a cup of cocoa to Lily, who was laughing again. The sight filled him with a strange mixture of joy and ache. He realized then that sometimes life gives you second chances disguised as ordinary mornings. And this time, he didn't want to waste it. Before leaving his car, he unfolded the letter he'd written. It wasn't long, just a few lines written in uneven handwriting. "You reminded me that being a father isn't about blood. It's about showing up." He folded it again and slipped it into his coat. As he stepped out, the cold bit at his cheeks, but he didn't shiver. The doorbell above the cafe chimed as he pushed it open. The warmth, the scent of coffee, the sound of Lily's voice, everything felt familiar again. For the first time in years, he wasn't a visitor to his life. He was coming home. When the doorbell chimed, Emily almost didn't look up. But when she did, the cup slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. Michael stood there, snow clinging to his coat, eyes full of apology and something deeper. "Peace," Lily gasped, sliding off her stool, running toward him before Emily could speak. She wrapped her arms around his waist, laughter bubbling through the room like sunlight through clouds. Michael froze for just a second, then knelt and hugged her back, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry I took so long." Emily's breath caught, her eyes glistening. For the first time, the cafe didn't feel like her job. It felt like home. They didn't talk about what happened right away. The cafe moved around them, customers chatting, the espresso machine hissing, snow melting off boots, but their silence said enough. Emily refilled his cup without asking, and he took the seat by the window, just like before. Lily drew something new. Not a family of stick figures this time, but a big heart filled with 3 names. She placed it on the table in front of him with a proud grin. Michael looked at Emily, who tried to hold his gaze but failed. Some wounds don't heal with words. Some just need presence. Later that day, when the crowd thinned, Emily finally walked over. "You didn't have to come back," she said quietly. "I know," Michael replied, his voice steady, gentle, "but I wanted to." The silence between them felt different this time, not heavy, but whole. She looked down, her hand brushing against the letter he had left on the counter. "You reminded me that being a father isn't about blood, it's about showing up." Her eyes softened as she whispered, "Then stay." He nodded once, not as a promise, but as a truth already kept. Weeks passed, and the cafe changed in small, beautiful ways. A second chair appeared beside Michael's at the window. Lily's drawings began to fill the wall behind the counter. Emily laughed more, sometimes without realizing it. Mornings weren't routine anymore. They were alive. Michael still visited the cemetery, but now he brought a drawing each time, tucked inside a little envelope signed by Lily. Grief still lived in him, but it no longer ruled him. He had learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding new places to put the love that remains. On a Sunday morning, sunlight spilled across the cafe like gold poured from heaven. Michael sat by the window, Lily resting her head on his shoulder, Emily behind the counter humming softly. Everything was ordinary. The sound of cups, laughter, the smell of fresh coffee, but for Michael, it felt miraculous. He looked out the window where snow melted into spring light and whispered to himself, "I made it." Emily caught his reflection in the glass and smiled. She didn't need to hear the words to understand. Some stories don't end with grand gestures. They end with quiet mornings, full hearts, and the simple act of staying.